Hello and welcome to my humble office slash bedroom. My name is Ian Garner. I am a student at MSU Meridian, and I am going to be teaching you about one of my favorite topics of all time, my favorite video game known as Skyrim. Skyrim is a game developed in 2011 by Bethesda Game Studios. It has won numerous Game of the Year awards, and to this day is still being played by thousands of people on computer and game console. I've chosen this topic because it's something that's near and dear to my heart. It is a fantasy role-playing video game that I believe has a lot of real-world parallels in modern history, ancient history, and is a good source of imagination fuel for young minds. I've drawn a couple of parallels to Skyrim in my own classes, just to keep things interesting and fresh, because I have teenage students, and teenagers love one thing and one thing only, and that is video games. So I'd like to take a moment and discuss with you a couple of things about Skyrim. I want to talk to you briefly about the geography. I'd like to talk to you about the early history involving Ysgramor and the settling of Skyrim, the Dragon War, the return of Alduin, and the Skyrim Civil War. So let's get into it. Skyrim is a fictional country. It is heavily inspired by the Scandinavian countries. You look around the in-game world, you see fjords, you see mountains, you see snow, you see tundra. You feel like you were in Norway or Sweden or something like that. There are 9 regions or holds in the game, and they are known as Eastmarch, Falkreath, Hafengar, Hjalmarch, the Pale, the Reach, the Rift, Whiterun, and Winterhold. Now, in exploring this game, you can explore the entire country of Skyrim. And now each hold is governed by a governor or jarl, again borrowing from the ancient Scandinavian terms for the leaders of the nation. In the game, you can travel to each and every one of these holds. You can go to the capital city of each hold, and you can meet the jarl. Now, if you would like, you can gain each jarl's favor by doing a special quest for him or her. You can gain favor for that jarl. You'll be allowed to buy property. You will be granted the rank of Thane, which is basically a get-out-of-jail-free card if you commit a crime. You can only use it once, so choose wisely. It's considered a great honor to be a Thane, and the people of the Hold respect you more as a citizen. Now I'm going to move on to the settling of Skyrim. Now, thousands of years ago, before you played the game, in the game's lore, Skyrim was populated primarily by a race of elves called the Snow Elves. Pale skin, white hair, thrived in Arctic conditions. Great and noble people. Well, there was an island nation to the north of Skyrim called Atmora, which is populated primarily by humans. One such man, his name was Ysgramor, was a great leader in Atmora. Well, Atmora was starting to freeze over, very similar to Antarctica in our own world. So he travels south to the land of Skyrim to see if there's a new place for his people to come to. He finds the Snow Elves there, and for a while there's a peace between the humans of Atmora and the elves of Skyrim. However, a couple of things happened. There was a city that the Nords built called Sarthal, and in that city, the Nords found some magical artifacts that the Snow Elves were really desperate to get their hands on. Also, the gestation period for a human is 9 months. For an elf, it is much longer because elves can live longer. Therefore, the humans were repopulating at a much faster rate, and the Snow Elves felt threatened by their strength and numbers. Well, one night, in the Night of Tears, which is borrowed from a recent history in World War II, or pre-World War II, I should say, when the Nazi Party burned down and looted and raided several Jewish businesses and shops in Kristallnacht, the Night of Shattered Glass. So there's a parallel between our history and fictional history here with the Night of Tears. Anyway, the Snow Elves invaded Sarthal, decimated the Nordic settlers. Ysgramor and a few of his friends escaped and sailed back to Atmora. Well, not one to be beaten and whipped and bruised, Ysgramor raised an army of 500, and he named them the 500 Companions. And they sailed from Atmora back to Skyrim and annihilated the snow elves. Gone. Those who survived were enslaved by the dwarves and twisted into golem-like creatures called the Falmer, but we'll get into that at a later time. So, a very brief version of the bloody history of the Nordic settlers and the snow elves of Skyrim. Fast forward a few hundred years. Now, the Atmorans became the Nords, and the Nords worshipped animals as their gods for a short time. There were the whale gods of the sea, there were the bear gods of the forest, and there were the dragon gods of the sky. And the chiefest among these were the dragons. The dragons were immortal. You could kill them, but other dragons could resurrect them if they so choose. The chiefest among those would be Alduin, the World Eater, firstborn of all dragons. Now, Alduin's job was to destroy the world every few thousand years so that it could be remade better and new. We could argue that that is evil, or we could argue that it is simply his job. Either way, it's not a very comforting idea to have your world destroyed so it can be made anew. Alduin's arc is very similar to Jormungandr's from ancient Norse mythology, and the main plot of Skyrim itself draws very heavily from Norse mythology. You may be familiar with the legends of Thor having to fight Jormungandr, Jormungandr being the giant world serpent whose destiny it was to eat the world so they could be made again at Ragnarok. Very much like that legend, our job is to play the last Dragonborn, this prophesied hero who would defeat Alduin and save the world from destruction, very much like Ragnarok. So, another parallel between the real world and this fictional world. Now, Alduin is the World Eater, the destroyer of worlds. His job is to destroy the world and make it anew. However, in his great power, he became arrogant and prideful, and he realized that he didn't want to destroy the world, he wanted to enslave it. So there was an uprising of Nords who decided that, in order to borrow from Twisted Sister, they weren't going to take it anymore. So they raised an army, and they decided to fight Alduin and his comrades. Well, they realized that Alduin was too powerful. So using an Elder Scroll, which is a papyrus scroll embedded with all the laws of the universe, they were able to rip a hole in the space-time continuum and send Alduin into the future. Fortunately for us, or unfortunately, that space-time continuum deposited him in Skyrim at the same time that we play the game. So, how convenient. So the main story of the game is us defeating Alduin after he comes out of his time travel loop, and we save the world from destruction, because of course we can. Alright, and the final bit is the story of the Skyrim Civil War. Now, I've already mentioned the drama with the dragons and the whole destruction of the world and how we have to avoid that fiasco. There is another problem that we can try to resolve if we so choose. And the beauty of Skyrim as a video game is that everything is up to the player's choice. If you want to pursue a questline, you can. If you want to ignore it, you have the freedom to do so. But we'll talk about this particular plotline now. There is a Jarl, the Jarl of Windhelm. His name is Ulfric Stormcloak. Now, Ulfric believes that Skyrim should be a free nation. He believes that Skyrim is a beautiful place for Nords to live and grow and build families, build a nation. He believes in independence. He's a patriot. Unfortunately, he has some very misguided and narrow-minded views regarding the elves. Skyrim used to belong, or I suppose you could argue it still belongs, to the Tamrielic Empire. Unfortunately, the Empire is basically strangleholded by a high elf faction called the Thalmor Dominion. And as a result, Ulfric does not care for elves at all. He has no respect for the Dark Elves, who he forces to live in the slums of his city of Windhelm. He has no love for the High Elves. He believes that Skyrim is for the Nords and for the Nords only. So while he believes himself to be a patriot, some of his views are incredibly racist, and a lot of players have a very hard time siding with him as a result, myself included. On the flip side, you can choose to fight for the Empire. You can fight for a united Empire. You can fight for strength. You can fight for unity. And yes, the Empire knows that it is being strangleholded, but it believes that with the unity in the aid of Skyrim and as Viking-like people, they can fight the Thalmor Dominion and restore themselves to their former glory. So there is an interesting dynamic in which we are allowed the freedom to choose who we want to fight for. We can fight for the free people, or we can fight for unity. So I don't know that it would be a perfect side project during a Civil War, American Civil War project in a history class, but I could see how it could be an interesting tool to segue into. All right, well, that is a very brief and very short highlight reel of why I enjoy the video game Skyrim, and a couple of parallels between our world and the fictional world. So I hope you've enjoyed, and I hope I didn't bore you too much, and I encourage you to go check out the game for yourself. Again, my name is Ian Garner, and thank you for listening.